Live now.
We're live now.
Go ahead.
Welcome, everybody. We really didn't get raptured. We was having some serious technical difficulty. Tré misplaced the start button. So
I lost it. The start button got
throwing
raptured.
him under the bus.
The start button got raptured.
The go live button got raptured. Sorry about that. Well, we're going to jump right into it. I'm Daniel. Everybody knows Tré. We have Rabbi Steve Berkson on here from M.T.O.I, and we have the donkey himself, Curtis Reid, from Bible Pathway Adventures. Donkey Speaks. So we've actually been having a really good time waiting for Tré to find the button. So sorry about that. So let's get right into it. Here we go. How's everybody doing, first of all? I know you guys are doing well, right?
Yep.
All right. Well.
Hey, good, Daniel.
Oh, man. Let's, I guess we're going to have to get right into kicking down this whole September 23rd thing. Matter of fact, I looked it up on Google. There's 240 million, like if you type in Rapture, September 23rd, 2017.
Only 240 million?
240 million hits of that right now. So it's creeping in again, like every year. So what I would like to do, because Curtis comes kind of from the same background I come from, I was going to see if Rabbi would kind of give us a little perspective on why this all sounds so ridiculous to him.
Why does this all sound so ridiculous to me?
You know,
what makes you think it sounds ridiculous to me? I thought we got raptured a few minutes ago, and that was the end of the need for the show. It proved that it wasn't.
It was only the button. The button was the only thing that was saved.
Okay, I get it.
I feel left out.
Yeah, that button wasn't left out, though, boy. I tell you what. Golly. That's crazy.
Right, no problem at all. Okay, so here's the thing. All right. We've got as usual, many times a year, there is that which comes up which gets hyped. And we seem to be a body that loves to fall into, we love the hype. We want to get excited. I mean, I understand. Listen, I want to make sure that I'm respectful. I'm not trying to mock anything. The purpose of the show is to have a lot of fun at the same time being serious without mocking. We don't want to mock the people that very seriously believe whatever they believe. It doesn't matter. We want to validate that people believe what they believe. Okay, now, but the thing is, we are susceptible, and I've been teaching this a lot in the last few weeks. I've been teaching about understanding why there's division in the body. And a lot of it comes from our lack of maturity. We have maturity issues. And it's in our immaturity that we are susceptible to emotional responses to things like hype. Okay? Yeshua is coming. That's not hype. When he's coming has gotten hyped tons since he left. Okay? There was hype. We read about it in Acts. We read about it in the New Testament. We read about all the hype. Is he coming now? Is he coming then? I mean, it's not been a new thing. This hyping, and promoting and getting excited about when he might actually be here is nothing new. Okay? That's been going on for forever, since at least the last 2,000 years. However, that being said, we have to understand from Scripture that we are given signs in the heavens. We are given teachers and prophets and people like that to speak to us, to get us to pay attention, but not necessarily to fall into hype. Okay? And it's the fear mongering or the stimulating, it's very titillating and exciting to think about, oh, he's coming like next month. Well, not going to happen probably, okay? However, you should be, and I know Curtis and I agree on this, I think we've talked about it many times, that we should be living our life like he's coming tomorrow, even though we know he's probably not coming tomorrow. But also we should be planning our lives like he may not even come in our lifetime. Because many people have taken these very well-promoted timing triggers, we'll call them, like these events that are going to happen. And there are signs in heavens, there's no doubt. Look, we had blood moons a few years ago, so we've got some things now with the stars, and there's going to be more. And those, but we've taken those as triggers to say, it's happening. But you know what? If you're prepared, think of it like this, back when you were in school. If you've been studying all along, and if you've been participating and paying attention in the class to the teacher, etc., then you didn't freak out when it was exam time. The reason people freak out at exam time is because they don't know how they're going to handle the exam. You know, people used to ask me all the time, why are you so calm? I said, because I already know what I'm going to get. The reason they were so upset is because they also know what they're going to get. I was just at peace that I deserved what I was going to get. If I studied, I knew I was going to get a good grade. If I didn't, I was going to get a bad grade. I wasn't going to get upset about it. I already earned it. Okay? And so if you're preparing all the way along, if he comes in September, this year, next year, or whenever, you're going to be ready. And there's nothing to get all hyped about. And so that's what I just kind of want to lay that out from the beginning. You know, from a Jewish perspective, I know that kind of, Daniel wanted me to kind of talk about it. The Jews don't have a rapture concept, okay? There's no thought in the Jewish mind that the events of Scripture are not happening here, okay? The Hebraic understanding is that everything we read about in Scripture is happening here. And so it's not a Hebraic or Jewish concept, this idea of rapture. Now, I know we're going to talk about this quite a bit, but you have to understand that, you know, Curtis and I will talk about, maybe a bit better to let even Curtis address this, because, you know, we come from this idea of two sticks talking. We come from this idea of coming from two different sides of Curtis likes to use this idea of the river, you know, and the river is where the rivers of life, the waters of life flow, with Yeshua in the river, and that we need to get off the riverbanks and in the water. Okay, and in that metaphor, Curtis really comes from a background on one side of the river, and I come from a background on the other side of the river. No different, no better, no worse. They're still not in the water. Okay, and so since the rapture idea comes more from his side of the riverbank, maybe we'd be better if I let him go ahead and start off, you know, kind of explaining kind of where that came from and you know how we should be handling that. Because I mean, I have some ideas about it, but I'll go ahead and pass the mic over to my brother from down under, Mr. Curtis Reid.
It's interesting. It's funny when we talk about this Ezekiel, 37, the two sticks coming together and whatnot, because look, from the Christian side of the riverbank, we've come up with a lot of our own Christian Talmud, oral teachings and traditions of men. It doesn't mean that there's not a lot of truth in some of that Talmud. If you go into, you'll see all the Talmud. If you go to the Wailing Wall right now in Jerusalem, and you go in there underneath there, you'll see a lot of the ancient Talmud writings and whatnot that are in there that are being studied by all the modern rabbinical schools. Are we trying to bring our Talmud into understanding the Shemaim, the heavens, and are we trying to then take our theology, which can often be really driven and established by these Talmuds on both sides of the riverbank, and then make the heavens fit our Talmud, our theology as such. Anybody who's walked with me long enough, I don't necessarily identify or accept the label of, Hebrew roots or, whatever Christian denomination, or even some of the movements associated in the Messianic movements. And not that there's not all good people in there trying to establish and understand truth in things as best as they can from whatever side they're coming from. But I've been led over the last 10 years, especially, to try and understand what it means to become a follower of. And I've come to realize that I can't do it without the foundations of my faith, the front of the book. And yet I don't want to throw away, the revelation and what has been brought about with, why Messiah came and established what he did, and then what went out as the gospel message, this confirming of the covenant and this reestablishing back to, the lost tribes of Israel, all this sorts of things. And so There is a lot in this. But from the Christian side of the riverbank, we predominantly right now, for those that would have maybe more of what they would consider to be a fundamental view or a fundamentalist view of Scripture, really has been infected with something called dispensationalism. And this has established a lot of doctrines that have come about concerning this subject of the rapture. And they're really not that old. You know, they try and make the arguments, oh, no, it's been around since the 2nd century and everything else. And these are very, very loose. And indeed, it's not been an established understanding or doctrine, really, that until it became this theory or this concept of we could be raptured at any moment, really was popularized through Darby and Darbyism and what happened with the Brethren movement at that time. And I don't want to get into, look, a lot of this stuff, but when you start to realize that dispensationalism has brought in certain into a lot of the Christian community that understands that we're in the end times, or they believe we're in the end times, and that we're heading for and looking forward to the approach and the coming of Messiah. So I don't hold against anybody about the coming of Messiah. I think it's a good thing. And indeed, Scripture wants us to understand it from that way when we're honest with the New Testament of the Brit Hadashah. However, to do this, and if we do this without the foundations at the beginning of the book and without understanding a Torah and just what is the foundations of our faith, we can end up sort of bringing in loose interpretations to fit a lot of this modern day theology that's crept in. And we are warned about a time when his people would not endure sound doctrine, that they'd be turned onto fables and things like this. And quite frankly, a lot of the stuff that's been brought in, certainly around things like discussing the rapture and all of these sorts of elements, have a lot of things, and we can talk about a little bit more in the program, to risk this not turning into a teaching. I know with our own fellowship, I'm going to be doing a part 1 and part 2 of Signs in the Heavens and do it in a bit more of a teaching format then. But the real thing that program and to say is this: we are warned that there would come a time before the coming of Messiah where teachers would be either deceivers or being deceived. I honestly believe that most of the stuff and the hype that we see right now going on YouTube and on the lead up to this, and indeed what occurred with the lead up to the tetrads and the blood moons and that sort of thing, is not based on good intent. So we're not here to mock and to attack our brethren who are trying to be aware of the day and age we're in. Not myself, not Steve, and this is not where we're coming from. If we try and interpret Scripture and the heavens and make it fit our theology, and we start making the heavens and the word itself dance around our theology, and we don't understand the history of our theology, and most people, most believers, even in the body today, it's gotten so deceiving that they wouldn't even know that they're touting dispensational doctrine. A lot of the Christians, and so they don't even know the theologies and the history of the theologies and how it came in, and that there is a lot of Jesuit doctrine that's come in, and there's a lot of stuff that has come in that has had agenda. And it has shaped a lot of these theological views. Then we take these theological views, and a lot of them are waking up right now. And the blood red moons did sort of start to get a lot of people on the Christian side of the riverbank to look once again at the Shemaim, the heavens, and to also consider maybe the importance of the Moedim, or the appointed times. That's a good thing, okay, that we see this happening again. However, here's the bad thing. When we take our theology and twist it and try and we risk what has become alarmingly disturbing to me, and maybe this is going to seem a little bit harsh, and I'll see what Steve, whether he agrees with me or not on this, but I believe what we're seeing on the lead up and as we're being sort of alerted to the signs in the heavens again, that we are possibly seeing people get utterly or dangerously close to breaking Deuteronomy 6, and they start divining. It's divination, and they're using the theology that is closely walking a very dangerous line into this. And this is what has become sort of disturbing to me, because this is in 1:14. We see that Yah said, let there be lights in the expanse of the heavens. I'm just going to read here a little bit of scripture. To separate the day from the night, and let them be for signs, signposts, and the appointed times of the Moedim, and for days and for years. It's very clear that he's establishing the Shemaim, and indeed they were created according to the Genesis accounts before man. So we've got something that is there that to our Elohim's wristwatch, his clock. Is this important? Yes. And in fact, I think why we're doing this program and to establish it is that this is important. The heavens and the signs of the heavens are important. The question is are we to look at this in a mature way or an immature way? And I'll just wrap up with my opening statement here, is to say this. What is alarming me from my side of the riverbank is that they tend to look at flippantly some of the things now, because they've been alerted that the Moedim actually means something, and they're all of a sudden starting to get some of these Hebrew terms, and it's this Johnny-come-lately thing. And what they're doing is they're quite willing to flippantly toss around some of the Hebrew wording and terms and some of the significance of the Moedim. But to be quite honest with you, they don't revere them, they don't honor them. They don't take the Sabbath seriously. They're not taking the Moedim seriously. They're not taking the Torah seriously. They're willing to take aspects of this to touch upon or flippantly reference them in order to justify certain theologies that are now coming out on YouTube, where essentially they're even touting that a doctrine like the Rapture is going to come into being on September 23rd, 2017. And they were doing this before the tetrads and so on and so on. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that and the danger of doing that, because on one hand, we got a saying down here in New Zealand and even in Australia that, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. And I think both Steve and I are not wanting to throw the baby out with the bathwater. We're not wanting to, yeah, that's right. We're not wanting to be with our Father's heavens and the Shamim and indeed the significance of it. But we do want to try and bring a little bit of maturity and to balance, and not be maybe so infected by a lot of the doctrine that has crept in and to a lot of my side of the riverbank. But indeed, actually is a lot now on the other side of the riverbank, because so many Christians who are coming out of certain Christian doctrines have flown across the river on the Flying Fox. They've landed on the other side, and they're in a Messianic camp or a Hebrew roots camp, and they've brought a lot of this dispensationalism with them, and they don't even know it. So we now got this hype going on both sides, and even fear and excitement and all this kind of stuff. So hopefully today we can bring a little bit of balance and just a little bit more of a, let's walk with this with maybe the reverence that it deserves, because there's a lot of immaturity out there that are seeing these YouTube videos right now and these certain teachers, and quite frankly, they don't have the maturity to know, even if they claim they're not setting dates and stuff, and we're going to talk about that, they're looking at and what they're listening to, and their excitement then takes them to going, well, the rapture is going to happen, or we're not quite saying it is, but they really are, and we'll talk about that a bit more. So really, that's where my heart's coming from. I believe it's where my brother Steve's heart's coming from, and I think this is the reason for the program. Not to attack, it's to bring maybe some maturity into the conversation. So I'll just close up my opening statement there. But there's some neat things to talk about, and but we're going to try and do this in a hopefully in a balanced and accountable way, which is not happening a lot on YouTube these days. So anyway, I'm not sure what you think of that, Steve, but Daniel.
No, and that's what I wanted to say. I want to make it clear. It's like, it's definitely not a belittling thing. It's not it's no disrespectful type of thing. But when I started talking to you guys about it, it was because I started seeing different things coming out of more of, from people that are supposed to be in the river that have left the kind of dispensationalism doctrine supposedly behind and got in the river and started doing the thing, come to Torah, start realizing what the truth looks like. But then this creeps back in, and I see it almost every year, every other year, but it just started bothering me that it was coming from inside the river. Like you said, yeah, there's people that went all the way over to the other side and they took that with them. But I kind of got sad because I saw it coming from the river, and I'm like, hold up, I thought, no matter time-wise how you've been into this walk, I thought that would have been one of the first things that got dealt with, that, you would have got some truth, some mentoring in that subject to realize how the dispensationalism, how that just ruins the beautiful part of the Messiah returning and collecting his bride and all that, with the whole, that the pre-rapture thing or whatever you want to, and it just started bothering me. That's why I wanted, to try to get you guys together on this, because it's like you said, it almost comes to the point where, like, that divining and that, you're almost setting it up like an idol thing, like, oh, this is going to happen, and almost like worshiping that date. And, it's not right. And so, trying to get some truth in this context from both sides versus, you just got somebody out here babbling about whatever, this rapture thing, the signs in heaven. And by no means do I want to take the signs in the heaven lightly, because they're placed there by the Creator for the purpose of a time clock, and it belongs to him. But when we start mismanaging it and, start giving false hope and all this stuff, then, I feel like it needs to be addressed. So, but like I said, no disrespect to anybody who follows that doctrine. I just want them to have some truth shed on, so they can test what it is that they are actually believing in or looking to. They can take some truth and go, oh, wait a minute, let's put this over this and see how this really does test out. And I wanted to correct myself. It's 2,450,000 results when you type in Rapture September 23rd, 2017, not 200 million. But still, 2,450,000 results in 0.38 seconds that comes up when you type that in. That's a lot.
I just want to say something as well, too, just to be honest with the program here, as to where Steve and I are coming from, or certainly where I'm coming from. And I'm going to make this very clear right now on this program, because we're a few months out from the date. The rapture, Christianity understands it, which I believe is out of context with the fall Moedim and a prophetic understanding of the fall Moedim. I'm going to make this statement. The rapture will not be happening on September 23rd, 2017. I don't think that it could even, or that it's remotely possible. I'm going to make the statement, it will not. And either a bold statement to some people still infected with dispensational teaching or whatever else it is. But if we get I believe, a more balanced and mature view on Scripture, it's not a bold statement at all. I'm not going to make this theology and all this kind of stuff try and fit in with every possibility, and then the date passes, and then all of a sudden we lose the reverence of the heavens. And this actually has happened since the blood red moons, because people making these claims. So for anybody watching, there will be no rapture September 23rd, 2017. And hopefully I can explain myself a bit more on that. But again, we can send this program out to a few of these teachers on the 24th or the 25th and let them see why we were doing this. And it's not a statement of arrogance or of trying to attack someone. It's just modern day theologies that our Father Elohim and his word has to dance to them. And so we're going to talk a bit more of a balanced perspective of even how to look at the subject like the rapture today.
Okay. I really appreciate, the input that both of you put in at this point. Just so that Curtis is aware what he can see on the bottom of the screen, they don't get to see on YouTube. So when I'm making you laugh, I know they're not getting to see that. So just so the people who are watching on the YouTube know that sometimes if you hear one of us laugh, it's because we're looking at the other one on our Google Hangout screen that you don't get to see. All right. Well, that being said, somebody in the chat, and I do have the chat on my right here, so I get to read a little bit. Somebody was asking us to define dispensationalism and dispensation. Dispensation has to do with the idea of dispensing, or the handing out, or dispensing with, or getting rid of, or the ordering of things. So in the dispensational thinking, you know, you have a simple way of thinking of it is two ways. One is that was for them. That was dispensed as being for them. This is for us. That's one part of it. So dispensationalism is a lot of that Christian mindset of that was for the Jews. The Jews had to do the law, but we have grace. See, that's a dispensational thought. Okay, it's not correctly scriptural, but correct to put in scripture, but it is a dispensational way of putting things. Also would be the ordering of things. In other words, this is the order that things are going to happen, including this idea of the rapture and then the tribulation and the timing of those things. How those things order is a dispensational sort of concept. So hopefully that answered the person's questions. I mean, I am looking a little bit on the screen just to...
Just let me add a little bit to that too.
Okay.
Because of the thing that comes out of it. But dispensationalism is based around ages. So each age has a distinct view that the Father was trying to bring in, and then that understanding. So that you'll often hear things like the church age. That's dispensational, labeling. And so they kind of set this out in all these ages, and they're dispensed through the ages. And what it does is it allows, I believe, for the word of the Father to be cut up. Even things like, Old Testament and New Testament, you're not going to find this in the actual word. This is dividing and cutting up of the word. Even things like chapter and verse. This is not, the Father he had books. See even chapter and verse now. This has been sort of cut up so that we can relate to things, but we've got to be careful that chapter and verse was not a part of the writings that came from the disciples, the prophets, and whatnot. So, but anyway, just to add into that. So I hope that helps too with whoever's asked that question.
Okay. No, I really appreciate that, Curtis. I was just teasing you with that little thing there I did. No, but really, the dispensational thing is really part of the problem. It's a big part of the problem for people to understand that, each age or each group, as they go through their generation, believes that they've gotten a certain understanding of how things really work. And each one comes up with their own way of believing it's going to be us. Every generation thinks it's going to be us. And they always come up with a really good argument for why it's going to be us. Okay, and so that's a big part of all this, is this why it's going to be us. And then it takes another step forward, which is not only why it's going to be us, but why it's going to be next month, or why it's going to be this year, or why it's going to be because of whatever sign. And we make really good arguments and cases for these things, but it doesn't make it actually true. It doesn't actually make it accurate. So what I want us to understand is that there's a couple of aspects to this whole thing that we go through, this dance, this ritual. It's almost like a ritual that we go through on a regular enough basis. And there's, first of all, if you're going to be looking at end time events, meaning, and I think we could all agree that end time events are simply a way of understanding when Yeshua is coming and how that plays out. Okay, end time events. And if you are studying end time events, rather than focus on watching 57,000 hours of why it's going to be September 23rd, maybe you might want to spend more time understanding what Scripture says has to happen and in what order. Because if you did that, you'd realize that all isn't going to happen between now and September 23rd. That's why Curtis and I can be very confident to tell you he's not coming on September 23rd. Now, we are told scripturally not to name dates. This is the opposite. We're telling you a date's not going to happen. But it's simply a matter of if you know the word, if you know the scriptures, you should also know that there are things that have to happen in a certain order that happen before Yeshua returns. Okay? And we have not seen those things be completed. And it would be very, very bizarrely unlikely that they would happen in the next 2.5 months, okay, between now and September 23rd. So that's first of all. That brings us to issue number 2. Issue number 2 is, well, why is it that we end up with dispensation? Why is it that we end up with this, as Curtis called it, Talmud? And by Talmud, he's not picking on the Jews per se. He's talking about every group's way of man-made understandings, okay? Whether it's the Jewish side or the Christian side, everybody's gotten very good at coming up with their own man-made traditions, understandings, and beliefs, okay? And we're talking about the ones that don't match Scripture, all right? And so when he uses the word Talmud, I hope that the people watching know he's not bashing the Jews. He very, very quickly will tell you that he's talking as well about Christian Talmud, any kind of man-made traditions of man, that it's not just traditions, meaning, because a lot of traditions are fine. It's a way of interpreting Scripture in a way that doesn't match Scripture because of tradition, okay? I think that's a good way to maybe say it. A way that you have a tradition that doesn't match Scripture, but that everybody's embracing it as if it is Scripture, okay? Now, but why here? See, I'm more concerned with the why, which is a heart. I'm kind of, pointing here at my chest, a heart and a mind issue. And the why, I believe, is because most of the Talmud on both sides is coming out of a need, a psychological, emotional need. We don't, I think I won't be stretching things by saying this, I don't think any of us wants to go through the tribulation. Why would you? It's described as the worst time of all time in the history of man. So because you wouldn't want to go through it, wouldn't it make sense that we would try to find an excuse and reason and justification of why we wouldn't have to go through it? And so that's step one. It's an emotional thing, okay? It's an emotional thing. We use this, by the way, to rationalize to ourselves and justify almost everything that we do that doesn't match up what the Father has said to do. Because we don't want to go through something or do something. This is why Torah observance is described as being hard and evil and awful and burdensome and terrible. Listen, I'm sorry, but I challenge any one of you to tell me one piece of Torah that's actually hard to do. I really do. Is it really hard to keep Saturday instead of Sunday? Hard. I mean, is it actually hard? Well, I know you have things you like to do on Saturday, but is it actually hard to keep a different day? Is it really hard to not eat shellfish and pork? And is that really that challenging? Is it really hard to not murder somebody or not commit adultery with their spouse or not to steal from them? Come on, is it that hard to keep the feasts instead of Christmas and Easter? See, none of this is hard. It is made more difficult because we live in a world that isn't keeping it. The Torah is not the problem, the people are. Okay, if the people were all doing this, you would find it simple. The reason we find it simple in America, and even down there in New Zealand where Curtis is, to keep Christmas and Easter and Sundays, because that's what everybody else is doing. So of course it's simple to do. So if everybody was keeping Torah, it wouldn't be that big a deal. And so, but we have a psychological, emotional problem. And our problem is we don't want to go through the tribulation. We don't want to deal with, on top of it, we have a compounding problem, which is life sucks right now. That's our compounding problem. And we want him to come tomorrow because life sucks right now. Because if you're not a life sucks right now person, you're not excited about him coming in September because you have things you want to still do now. But all those people that are excited about him coming in September, they're excited about it because they are not happy now. And they want that state that they're in to end so that they can now be happy when he comes. They think that he's going to cure all of their ills and all their problems. He's going to change their personality, change all the circumstances. See, Abba's leaving us on this planet to work through that stuff first. Okay, so that's one of the other reasons why I don't think he's coming in September. The body needs to be here right now. The body needs to go through some trials and tribulations. I taught this today. The body needs to grow up and mature before we get to the wedding. The father is not marrying a child bride. Okay, excuse me, the son is not marrying a child bride. Okay, we're not going to be sitting up there in our diapers with our pacifier in our mouth and getting married. We are here to grow up. And I don't think Yeshua is showing up anytime soon because I'm looking at the body, and please don't be offended, but I think if we're being honest, the body is not mature and ready for this. We're not. None of us. I'm talking about myself. We're not ready. So why do we see the push for things like a rapture, the push for things like it being in September? Because we are not happy where we are, and we're looking for escape. So I'll leave that as a way to kind of launch into whatever either one of you want to jump from there.
Well, Steve, actually, just to pick up on that, one of the things that comes from dispensational, this whole thing, because they think of the Great Tribulation as a 7-year period. By the way, nowhere in Scripture is the Great Tribulation given a 7-year period. This all comes from erroneous doctrine that links back to Daniel 24 through to 27 in particular, which is the scriptures they try to use, and they get into this whole 70th week of Daniel doctrine, and there's so many things how that links back to Isaiah. Even understanding that Daniel was aware of the prophecies of Jeremiah, where was the order, the decree of the rebuilding of Jerusalem, and then they try and create dates around this. And I don't want to get into all of that today, because that's a teaching in and of itself. But essentially, they make the conferment or kabar, or the confirming of the covenant. They essentially make Messiah anti-Messiah through their doctrine. It's actually very, very serious, and quite frankly, it's led to a lot of confusion. But they then, out of this, they pull what's called a 7-year Great Tribulation period. Scripture is very clear, and I believe we need to take this seriously. I do believe there is a gathering of the bride. I do believe that the bridegroom is coming for his bride, and I do believe we are promised to be spared from his wrath. Now, a gathering understanding from a Moedim perspective versus a dispensational rapture perspective are two very different things, and I do want to try and establish that distinction today, so that we don't get caught up in this. But one of the things they use is, oh, well, the reason why we're going to be raptured out of here is because there's no way that that Jesus would beat up his bride before this. And it's like they use these flippant statements to almost, they insinuate that this, us going through tribulation or travail is somehow the groom beating up his bride. Now, nowhere in Scripture does it say the groom beats or doesn't beat up his bride. That is just come from dispensationalism. And I want to say something very clear on the program today. If they wish to use that argument instead of the way Steve did, which Steve said that it's required for preparation, our garment preparation, that tribulation is there to help us grow and mature. And in fact, indeed, we are to enter into our travail, to enter into the narrow gate, or the crushing. If we take the dispensational, modern, sort of Christian view, which says, well, he doesn't beat up his bride, essentially, what we need to do is we need to apologize for our brethren that went before us. I think that Yah's going to need to apologize to the apostles, to the disciples. I think Yeshua is going to need to apologize to them, because in my understanding, I can't even conceive that the disciples were not the bride of Messiah. And in fact, I see an event before the incredible night of Gethsemane where he lifts up and he's speaking a very definite marriage covenant language. And he says, I will not partake of this cup until I'm with you in the Father's house. And this is a statement that he's telling them they're the bride. Yet what were these men all about to endure for the sake of bringing the true gospel to not only the Jews first, Judah, but also to the lost tribes of the house of Israel? Now, we got something very serious here, because if you knew how these men's lives went and how they ended and what they endured and what they went through, apology that needs to be made to them, because apparently he's into beating up that part of his bride, but not this one. Not the ones that enjoy their Slurpees and eat their popcorn and watch their latest football games or whatever else it is. They're the ones that don't deserve to be beaten up. No, it's these faithful servants and followers of Yeshua that were charged with the early kahal, the ecclesia, or what they would call the church, to bring about this incredible news that would allow us to be restored as the house of Israel. I'm sorry, but we need a mature perspective on this. And flippant little statements about a bride not being beaten up doesn't cut it. And so this kind of stuff starts to anger me, because these statements are used to keep immature spiritual people continuing not to look. When Steve was giving a view that how we are to understand and view tribulation, that is the mature biblical view, and indeed the scripture supports it. Okay, we are promised tribulation actually by scripture. So I'd like to know why it is that we, right at this time, probably in one of the most deceived generations I can think of, one of the most mature when it comes to understanding scripture, suddenly we get the free pass. And if Steve or Daniel or Tré or anybody can answer me on that one, I'd love to hear it, because I've been years into this and I've not heard it from any of them, and not from any of my brethren on the dispensational side. And I've walked and known some of these teachers for many years, and indeed names that people would recognize out there. And they do not have the answers. They get the luxury of doing these things on YouTube and people not understanding, or books or DVDs, whatever. So anyway, I'm sort of done there, but this is the stuff that kind of angers me, because what it does ultimately is this is going to attack, I believe, the significance of understanding a prophetic understanding of the return of Messiah, his Moedim, and indeed the heavens themselves. So it's certainly where I come from when doing something like this, because we need to get people to move on and grow up, as Steve was indicating.
Absolutely. And, you know, I want to bring up the fact both of y'all was talking about the chastising thing and the refining process is actually a great process to bring the people of Messiah, you know, to get them right like they're supposed to be. And the whole fact that the dispensationalism, like you get the free ride type of thing, it's like you don't even get the option of really being loved by him, because the ones he loves, he gets right. He refines those. So just hearing you guys talk about that made me think about really what you're really saying is, based on the scripture, that if he loves us, he's going to refine us. He's going to give us tribulation. He's going to make sure we're right for when he returns to be with him forever. Where if you're not refined and you're just taken, it's almost like you're not even loved. It's like a whole opposite teaching on being loved by the Creator. So, you know, I just want to throw that in there, because that's exactly what it sounds like when I hear you two talking about the tribulation process and what that really is, and the way scripture defines being refined by him. And I think he in his sermon today, or in his teaching this morning on the live stream, he was talking about the same kind of thing, like when trouble approaches, and you know, you got to go through it, and you know, you get out of it, and then the next one shows up, and there's always something going on where he's testing you and trying to figure out where your heart is, and if your faith is really going to be there to help you walk it out, like it's really, you know, like what it's designed to do. So, you know, that's my little rant.
You know, go ahead, Curtis.
No, I just going to say that, yeah, I think, you know, and I'm going to, not to detract from this, because I do want to stress a little bit of the significance of how important the Father does take the signs of the heavens. But I think if we don't talk up front and be honest with some of the shenanigans that's going on out there, we're not actually able to see or hear the scripture. And it's why I'm laboring a little bit on my end, because there are some really neat scriptures to understand the importance of the heavens, but we just don't want to bring the leaven that sits in our house that breeds all this hypocrisy from our theologies and then bring it to the word. And this is kind of where my real concern is coming from, you know, just from a real heart perspective. So anyway, so I'm excited to look a little bit deeper at that and some of these things in the word too.
Yeah, you know, I think it's really important Okay, so now we're good. Okay, so here's the thing. We want to address, and I think this has helped answer what you brought up, Curtis, the point you brought up, is we want to understand what's driving this. Okay? What's driving this is an immature pride, ego, fear, a lot of fear driving this, okay? And we don't want to go through this stuff. But, you know, in Deuteronomy, right after the Shema, it talks about how You know, actually in Deuteronomy 8, it talks about how the Father chastises who he loves. Deuteronomy chapter 8. You know, and I always quote verse 2, where it talks about he wants to see whether it's in your heart to keep his commandments or not. He wants you to be humbled. But later on, he talks about he chastises every son that he loves. The thing is, nobody likes chastisement. And there's also verses talk about that nobody likes chastisement while you're having it happen and while it's going on in your life, but the fruit it bears, all of a sudden now you're realizing, wow, this was actually a very good thing. This is good stuff. It's through our difficult times that we are most transformed. It's in our difficult times that we are most changed and challenged to change. The greatest time of change in the world will be the tribulation. The greatest time of people transforming their hearts to him will be during the tribulation. And so this is not something to be afraid of. This is not something to be concerned about. It will be the greatest transformative period of time in the history that there's always been, that's ever been. And so we need to be excited that that time, while it won't be fun, is going to be unbelievable. The miracles that will be happening, the signs and wonders that will be happening, it's supposed to make us so amazed that we won't even think about how amazing the first Exodus was. But yet we're afraid. And because we're afraid, the churches and the theology geniuses of the ages for the last couple of thousand years have come up with escapes. These are escapes. Now, a lot of you say, but what about what it says in the scripture when it talks about we'll meet him in the sky? That's actually gets us to like the next piece of this. Well, what about the accuracy about what it actually says? Well, what it says is that we're going to meet him. Okay, and then from that point forward, we'll be where he is. Okay, so where is it in your scriptures that he comes here 3 times? Okay, it says he's coming again. And when he comes again, he's coming to rule and reign as King of Kings, Master of Masters. It says that when he comes in Zechariah 14 that he's going to land on the Mount of Olives and it's going to split in 2. So when it says that we will see him and meet him in the sky, we're meeting him on his way somewhere. He's not going back up into the heavens. When we see him, and everybody will see him, he's going where? Jerusalem. He's going where? To the Mount of Olives. He's going where? To the battle of Zechariah 14, when all the armies of the earth have gathered against Jerusalem. He's going to that place at that time. And we, if we are in that first fruits, will be changed in that twinkling from the corruptible into the incorruptible, so that we are prepared in the right type of body to be in that battle, the worst battle the universe has ever seen. And that battle, from that point forward, after we meet him in the sky on the way to the battle, we will always be with him where he goes. But where's he coming? He's coming here. He's not coming here, grabbing a bunch of people and coming back. That verse doesn't exist anywhere. There's no verse that says he's coming here, grabbing a bunch of people and coming back. It just doesn't say it. Now, if you go to Proverbs chapter 2, the last couple of verses, it says that the wrong are taken away and the righteous are left behind. The opposite of what, Tim LaHaye and those guys were teaching in their Left Behind books, okay? It's the opposite. We are to go through the process, through the fires. I did a teaching called Baptism of Fire. It has nothing to do with speaking in tongues. It has nothing to do with anything from the charismatic movement. It has to do with understanding what trials are about. That's what James starts off his whole letter about. Count it joy when you find yourself in trials, because the trials will change you and transform you and build endurance. It will grow you if you will allow it to. If you'll not be afraid of it, if you'll be just allowing the Father, the master potter, to mold you with his hands. But we're afraid. We're very fearful people. See, fear and doubt is the whole point of the book in its war against faith and trust. We have a natural inclination towards fear and doubt. Trust and belief and faith does not come naturally to us. It's not the flesh. The flesh has fear. The flesh has doubt. The trust, the belief, the emunah, this is a higher level thought process than we have naturally as human beings. It comes from above. he gives to us, but then we take it and stick it in a little box in the corner and we don't use it. So we still embrace and walk around in that fleshly place called fear and doubt. And because of that fear, oh boy, are we excited about a thing called the rapture, because hey, he's going to come and take us away and we don't have to deal with all that stuff because it's scary. And I'm afraid, and I don't want to deal with that stuff. And I'm not mocking you, I'm serious. We're afraid of all that stuff that's coming. And so we want to know, hey, I'm not afraid of what's coming because he's going to pull me out of it before it happens. Boy, that makes me feel like I've got my escape out of tribulation card, or whatever you want to call it. But look, you know, the Rapture bus has a blown engine and 4 flat tires. So if you bought a ticket, I'm sorry, but there are no refunds. All right? There's no Rapture bus. The Rapture comes up out of a King James way of translating the Greek, and we will be raptured to meet him. Okay? But that's only about meeting him. But where's he going? If I tell you that, okay, and for those of you who understand the United States, okay, I live in Chattanooga. All right, I live in Chattanooga. And let's say that I'm going to, I don't know where I want to say I'm going to. Let's say we're going to Asheville, Tennessee, and I'm going to go up through Knoxville. Okay, I'm going to go to Asheville, North Carolina. I'm going to go to Asheville. So I'm going to go up. I'm going to get on 40 after I get into Knoxville and go all the way into North Carolina, go to Asheville. Now, what if I said to you, I'm going to meet you in Knoxville? Does that mean I'm taking you back to Chattanooga? Do you see what I'm talking about? I'm going somewhere. And you said, hey, that's cool. I want to go there too. I want to be with you. I said, great. I'll meet you on the way. I'll meet you. I'm going somewhere, but you can meet me on the way. It doesn't say he came down and grabbed him. It says we met him in the air because he was on his way somewhere. Okay, and we will be caught up in the air. And we're going to come up and meet him because he's on his way. He's got a mission. He's got a task. He's got someplace he's got to be.
Can you still hear me, Daniel?
Yeah, I can still hear you.
Okay, right. So I was just wondering if it had come through. This is not echoing. The scripture that's often touted, that's used, is in a twinkling of an eye, right? And it is clear the dead in Messiah will rise first, and those who are alive will be caught up to meet him in the clouds of the air. That is not caught up to the throne room. That's not caught up to the place, to Yah. It is intimating there is an event that is occurring on the way to what will be in the fulfillment of the fall Moedim, the return of Messiah, and where he will put his feet on the Mount Olives. But this has been interpreted to go way beyond the place where it's supposed to be. And I believe one of the reasons for that is because there really isn't a prophetic understanding of the fall feasts. One of the things that dispensationalists love to do, and they love to do this with their theology, they're quite happy to accept that the first coming of Messiah in the flesh, he fulfilled to the day the spring Moedim, or spring appointed times, if they're aware of how that relates to the fulfillment of prophecy at that time. But then they get educated on that, and indeed many have in the last 10 years. They get educated that Messiah actually fulfilled this, and he could hold them accountable right to the day. The Pharisees, the Sadducees, the scribes at that time. Comes to the fall Moedim, so we've seen that we're told to honor it in the same year, every year, a dress rehearsal. A Moedim. This is what was happening before the coming of Messiah 2,000 years ago. If those who were honoring Torah and those who were understanding the Father's ways, and indeed if they'd understand a lot of the prophetic significance laid out in Torah and the prophets, they would have recognized their Messiah. They indeed were, as such, the event that would see it literally come to pass. Now, here's what's interesting. When it comes to Moedim, they're no longer willing to look at the only reference we have of how Yah views his appointed times. And that is, they will happen in the year that they're going to be fulfilled, his appointed times in sequence. But I've got this theology that says there's a 7-year Great Tribulation and I'm going to get raptured and everything else. So therefore, but I'm starting to realize that the appointed times mean something, and we're starting to be able to link that to M.T.O.I or Feast of Trumpets. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull that now out of sequence. I'm going to put a 7-year gap in there. And I'm gonna say that the rapture happens on Feast of Trumpets and it gets fulfilled. But now it's a 7-year Great Tribulation, which isn't stated in Scripture. It's 1,260 days. And I'm just gonna break all of this up because they haven't honored it themselves. They don't have a reverence of it. They don't take that seriously. There's a reason why we're in a dress rehearsal, same year in sequence every year, because when it comes to the actual fulfillment of these, it will be in the same year in sequence. There is no other pattern biblically that we can reference. We've got Moedim were fulfilled literally in sequence. We were told, according to Torah, to honor them same year in sequence. Why do we have the right with our modern day theologies to all of a sudden now come and break these up? The Moedim, so we can kind of, make our doctrines fit somehow this, biblical pattern, which I really now just get to play with like silly putty. And so we're seeing this happen, and people are hearing this, and it sounds good because they're starting to link it. Well, the rapture is going to happen on the Feast of Trumpets or Yom-Teruah. And so therefore, I can now give it some sort of Hebraic foundation, but I'm still bastardizing the actual instructions of Torah. Do you see where I'm coming from, Daniel?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so they're doing this flippantly, and I'm going, what gives you the right to do this with your modern theology? And then make the Father and his times dance to your theology. Seriously get into this divination where you can practice it. Now we are going to talk about something that happened at the birth of Yeshua, and there was Magi in the Parthian Empire. They're known as the kingmakers. We're actually looking for signs in the heavens, but they were not divining. They waited for it to happen. Big difference. We're now playing with stellarium and other sort of things online and going forward and, using all this Copernicus mathematics that, so, and what we're starting to do, and then we take the Moedim flippantly, and then we use some Hebrew words over here, and then we do all of this, and I just take my dispensational theology and I do a YouTube video, and then I play around with it all, and next thing you know, somebody's just going, so what you're telling me is I'm going to get raptured and lead my miserable life. That's all they want to hear. Here's my concern. When the Great Tribulation does start, raptured, because this is not what Scripture is teaching. And this isn't about being pre-trib, mid-trib, post-trib, getting into all millennialism, pre-millennialism, preterism, all these kinds of things. We got all these little biblical hermeneutics that chop it all up, and it all sounds intelligent. And it's all just one big mess, because we brought all this garbage to the party. Read what it says. Let's understand his Moedim. Let's understand his Sabbaths. Let's understand his Torah. Let's understand that he's laying something out in a very beautiful and very powerful and very simple understanding, prophetic understanding, but it's deep. The moment we start stepping away from all this stuff, we're going to end up entertaining all of this weirdness. And my real concern here is this. There is many on the Christian side of the riverbank that have dispensational theology in them, whether they know it or understand it or not. The Great Tribulation is going to start one day, and they are not going to be raptured. And apparently Scripture says that there's going to be a great falling away. Sudden, this thing they believed to be so scriptural did not occur. So what else is wrong now? See, they never really had looked for themselves. They never really did challenge their teachers. They never really did look in and understand why these, why even honoring the Moedim were put in place. This whole prophetic fulfillment that would be occurring on Moedim that were all pointing to Messiah. And so this has become quite serious because, I do believe that we are in a serious time. And I think that Hasatan is muddying the waters through bad doctrine, just like Scripture warns about. And they will heap upon themselves teachers that will itch their ears. You have to be able to itch their ears somehow, which means you've learned something that now is being said by somebody else that itches your ears. You want to hear it because you don't want to go through refining or garment preparation. You don't want to have any tribulation. You just want to be watching your football game and just whoosh, you're gone. That all that bad stuff was for those disciples.
Those heathens, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
But he only beats a portion of his bride, and all this kind of stuff. And so anyway, this is where I get kind of concerned because this is dangerous stuff too. We need to this stuff and to prepare people that there is a garment preparation. There is a reality of a coming Messiah. There is a groom. The signs in the heaven do matter. But again, how are we to view all this? And that's the lens which I've seen a lot of monkey business going on, certainly with how dispensationalism is affected. And I know a lot of that's affecting as well, whether they understand it or not.
Well, and I think they're looking for these false signs too, not just the signs in heaven thing, but like this whole so-called peace treaty or this anti-Messiah figure that's that's the guy. Now I can get ready, and it's really strange how all that everybody's waiting for these signs to quote unquote get right. When if you look back at when Messiah comes the first time, it's like there's a lot of people miss that, very clearly miss that, and they had signs, but it's the whole. Everybody blowing this thing up this way or putting their own spin on things. And it's kind of scary because there's a lot of people that I know that I came from that I genuinely believe they love the Creator, but they just have no idea. They're not been drawn out. I can't explain it. It's like he says, the Father has to draw you out. He has to draw you. I can't draw him. So, it is scary, and it's a self-sovereign thing too, I think, because you don't want to go through the refining process. You don't want to go through the bad stuff. So I'm going to sit on the throne. I'm going to declare that I don't have to go through it. Really, that's what it is.
Yeah. And we need to establish that there's a great thing. If in Psalms 19:1, let's give credence to the heavens here because there's a glory here that goes to Yah, and it's important that we do this. The heavens are telling the glory of Yah. How is that? They were created before the players, before man, and so there's something that is telling the glory of Yah. Well, to my understanding, the glory of Yah is the plan of salvation in Yeshua. It's there. Incredible stuff that an understanding that has come through understanding what's known as the Hebrew Maseroth. And however, that being said, we got this thing called the modern zodiac, and then we get astrology in there, and then you get divination going, and all of this stuff is covered up, or basically put aside. I'll give you the parable. If there's really something good in a room and I don't want you to have that goodness, got to put up a skull and crossbones on it and danger warning sign. And then you never go in and check that room because you're too scared to. Zodiac and astrology really does a great job of this because it doesn't allow us to understand that the heavens were created by the Father. They're not in the control of Hasatan. He plays with the heavens. No one else gets to do that. And in Psalms 19:1, it's very clear. And their expanse is declaring the work of his hands. So let's not take away from the significance of the heavens, right? I mean, it's saying this is the glory of Yah, which is Yeshua. So what is going on here? Is there possibly something that Hasatan is not wanting us to understand, and he's muddying the water through, modern day astrology? Now, the great way to understand a healthy perspective of the heavens versus the unhealthy divination of astrology is that astrology will always point to you. What's my star sign? What's my, what are the stars saying about me? And what's my, all of these things that we get into, from tarot cards to, all the, to even people seeking, diviners to, tell them what's going to happen in their life based on the heavens or based on whatever. And a lot of this links into even a lot of the Greek zodiac and mythology that came out of that. So then what a lot of Christians do is they go, oh, well, we shouldn't even look at the stars, because somehow they become of the devil. And it's like, no. It's muddying the water. And just because we have astrology going on that is trying to put us on the throne and talk all about us doesn't mean that the heavens don't declare his glory, and that glory is all about Yeshua, where it's not about us, it's about what he's doing, about what he's done. And so we can end up having either an astrological view, because we're sitting on the throne of self-sovereigns, or we can end up having a biblical understanding that something is declaring his glory. And there has been some neat work and understanding that the whole gospel message, the true gospel message, is actually been in the sky. Now, it's difficult for us to understand now because we're just thousands of years on, and you have to get into some serious writings that go back, but to understand how this was passed on through ancient Hebrew culture. But it really does appear they had an understanding that the heavens were declaring his glory, and it was more than just the beauty of it. I don't know what the heavens look like, the Shamayim, before the flood. All I know is we are post-flood, and we are looking at a broken down version of everything. We might enjoy the beauty of the broken down version and everything else, but what did the heavens look like before the great flood? What did the earth actually look like before the great flood? We are seeing the broken version. Is it possible that the expanse pre-flood was even more clearly understood, more clearly seen, and that glory was much more evident? And so, speaking from a post-diluvian perspective, and so what I don't want to do is read and add too many things to this other than what Scripture is indicating and what has been passed down by those who cared about the actual Scripture, and why we've been and why Israel was created, and even why Judah has preserved certain understandings of things, and why the Father entrusted them to do so. If you go into Psalms, continue on in Psalms, day to day pours forth their speech, and night after night reveals knowledge. So in Scripture itself is telling us, Psalms, and David, he's saying, look, it's doing this. Well, is it doing it according to his own imagination, or was it doing it according to something that he understood? In fact, it said there is no speech or words where their voice is not heard. So there's a real importance being given here, but I'm going to keep going. Voice has gone out through all the earth, and their utterances to the end of the world. How did that happen? See, there's something going on here. In them, he has placed a tent for the sun, which is as a bridegroom. Now he's going to even speak this marriage covenant language coming out of his chamber. And just remember the word chamber, because there's just some interesting scripture we're going to refer to regarding that. It rejoices as a strong man to run his course. So in other words, there's something in play here. And just because you don't understand it, or the waters have been muddied, or you've been masking it, there's something going on. Really? All right, well, we go into the Psalms 147:4. It says, to such a degree, he not only numbers the stars, but he gives them all a name according to Psalms. So this is interesting. Does he take the heavens seriously? But let's keep going. Job's being corrected. Okay, so if I take you to Job 38:31, he's being corrected. and corrected, and the Father is using the Mazaroth, or the heavens, the Shemaim, as a way of correcting them. Now, unless you have an understanding of the heavens, can you correct someone to this degree? The sweet influences of the Pleiades, or loose the bands of Orion. You telling me that Job was stupid regarding the heavens? How can somebody correct me using something I don't have an understanding of? I don't think Yah's playing games here. I think he's correcting Job. And so he's correcting him using something that that Job certainly has a familiarity with. So I think it's just important to remember this. And then he goes into Job 38, 32, 33. I'm just going to read here. Can you bring forth the Mazaroth in its appointed time? Sons of Arcturus. Can you guide Arcturus with his sons? Do you know the ordinances of heaven? Can you set the dominion thereof in the earth? So this is interesting stuff where the Father is establishing a lot of things to be able to, correct and reprove him. Going through a hard time here. And so, again, just should we take seriously that it's declaring his glory, that that we're seeing something post-diluvian, that there may have been an understanding that has come through, that his whole story and plan of salvation, it could be written in the heavens? Yes. Do we use them to divine and forecast future events?